like Circa, what we're seeing is people who are now having to work in a different environment spend many, many more hours in a different environment. So from a home decor perspective, similar to food in the sense that you're spending more time at home, it's impacting their desire and their want to have a more comfortable place to work. And so I think that's driving some of our incremental purchases. That somebody's sitting in a room looking at that same tired lamp they've been looking at for a long period of time. Now they're in there every single day looking at that lamp. There's some motivation to make that purchase. So I think that's part of it. I also think that a lot of people who were reticent to shop online, who basically were either technology laggards or just really wanted to touch and feel things, are coming across the threshold. So we're getting non-savvy online buyers buying online, which means we have to accommodate somebody who isn't as comfortable in that kind of environment. And I suspect, and we'll see in the long run, but I suspect those people will stay online at least part of the time. I can tell you that more than half the additional consumer business we've done so far since the pandemic started came from people who've never done business with us before.
Wow.
So it's very exciting. If we can turn them into repeat buyers, we love it.
I think Al, you bring up a really good point. And we've started to go look at specific audiences that transact and shop on our website. And traditionally, we have been focused on SMBs, which represent a little less than 50% of our total browsing and buying population online. And we saw that pretty rapidly, as I mentioned before, interest and productivity of that specific audience really declined, and it almost started day one of April 1st. But what we saw was a pretty sizable shift into consumer goods, like you had also mentioned, Al, before. And so and mostly along specific demographics, what we saw was the gaming population absolutely exploded on Lenovo.com. We've seen gaming sales of PC products and accessories and headsets and software titles and those kinds of things growing by 70-80% year on year. I think one of the prevailing hypotheses is that for us was that the stimulus checks were a great way for people to potentially buy things that made them happy during some of these times where they had to stay at home, and with a lot of free time, gaming was something that people felt like they really wanted to go do. So our gaming business has been explosive. But I also wanted to reinforce something that you said. We've traditionally been focused on acquisition of customers that are mostly digital savvy. We call them digital natives at Lenovo. But what was interesting was that what we started to go see is a pretty rapid shift in people who were traditionally uncomfortable shopping and purchasing online, doing so at a much more accelerated pace. And I think what's interesting, and one of the learnings that we have, is that the internet for some of these people, and the internet in general, is a pretty seismic democratization of data, where now you can, rather than going into individual stores and learning about products and getting pricing, you're really able to go from tab to tab to tab, comparing different vendors, different retailers, to go find the product that meets your needs. And it really comes down to how well are you positioned in the market? What does your supply situation look like? And ultimately, how well are you servicing those customers and meeting their needs? And I think it's been a really interesting learning, because we really built a business around how do we best serve three specific audiences: gamers, students, and SMBs. But I think we've had to start to think more broadly about how do you reach a wider tranche of customers who don't fit into those three audience segments, because they have needs that are met, and they have very different expectations on what type of content they consume, the extent to which they're willing to go buy high purchase items online with a credit card. It's just a completely different mindset.
From a food perspective, I'm going to take people back with their memories about 10 years. When the last economic recession happened in 2008, 2009, and millennials, which was the youngest and the biggest cohort coming into the marketplace, got impacted in a very negative way based on the situations back then, there was a significant shift that happened to experiential driven economy. People went from buying to renting, went from, staying home to traveling. And that kind of created a huge shift. The whole New York City or any urban city restaurant scene just absolutely exploded over a few years. People were traveling all around the world. That became a thing because they chose not to invest or could not afford to invest. So they were using their discretionary monies in experiential experiences, which had a negative effect on the whole food space because the shift to away from home happened drastically. So if you look at the grocery industry, we have been in the low single digit growth for the last 10 years. What this crisis does, is it gives a whole new shift away from experiential economy to stay at home. And already Al said it, what he's seeing, new buyers are coming into the lighting business and new people are coming into industries that they had never seen before. And we are seeing the same way, like, people are buying, people are owning home, the whole residential real estate market is booming, which has a direct correlation to the growth of food industry. So I believe that will be a huge shift that will stay with us for a long, long time. Additionally, if there are any consumer goods people on the call right now on this WebEx, I would share a very interesting insight that I learned over the last few days. From a loyalty perspective, brand marketeers live and die by brand share, market share within their business, and loyalty is a huge thing. But in the food space, because during shelter in place, customers bought only what was available on the shelf because they had to get it. Their loyalties were broken at that point of time, and 48% of new buyers are going to stay with the new brand that they bought. So if you are a brand that lost customers, you got to do something about it. And if you have a brand that you gained customers because your supply chain was intact, you have a great opportunity to keep the new customers. So I believe that creates an opportunity for both. Some have to protect and some have to gain from it.
Ask a simple question. What does the new retailer look like? The new retailer, I think, focuses on shopping convenience. So again, are you really utilizing those technologies? Are you really making your web experiences seamless and easy and frictionless? She knows the power of the social economy. Social media is booming completely. Knows the power of the social economy, knows how to create new value. So that's where I can think of those experiment that the example that I gave in terms of the innovation hotspots emerging based on that activity indoors and the level of exposure and so on. She knows her customer very well. That's supremely important because the consumer behavior is changing very quickly. If you do not have the tool or if you do not have the inclination to understand and analyze or the resources to analyze, you definitely are at a disadvantage. So I think knowing your customer, I think, is absolutely essential on an ongoing basis. Has an integrated digital strategy. She should be able to merge everything, right? I mean, all that stuff would be integrated. So just understanding this digital ecosystem becomes very important. Is socially responsible because we are seeing that's another trend which has really increased. We are seeing consumers preferring to buy from retailers who really stand for a social cause, which I think is a very, very positive shift we are seeing during this time. So while the pandemic is very challenging, I think one of the big positives is it has somehow really brought all of us much closer as human beings. And that is, I think, one of the things which is getting manifested through consumer preferences very clearly for businesses who are more socially responsible. Has very clearly a diverse customer database, a customer base essentially, right? So let me keep moving on. Promotes a healthy lifestyle. I think staying at home, one of the things that there is a lot of articles out there as well. Very clearly, I think healthy lifestyle has become a pretty big focus because we are getting a lot less exercise as we were forced to stay indoors for a very long time and still are probably for most cases. So that's where I think we are seeing a lot of retailers would sort of go that direction. And last but not least is embraces technology-driven innovation, constantly thinking as to how can I really add customer value.